here's the thing. Let me take a step back because this is really, really important. Innovators have an aha that leads to building of a product. That aha is predicated on an insight, and that insight is predicated on a problem. And the way most innovators express it is, it shouldn't be this way. It should be a different way. And they become obsessed with it. And the most legendary entrepreneurs are maniacs about solving that problem. And that's great. That's what they should be. What they forget is that when they go to say ta-da, they think that talking about the product, that the product will speak for itself. It doesn't. So that's the first thing. The second thing is with 2 million apps in the App Store and all kinds of brand, like the most important thing in marketing is branding. Really? Wrong. Dell has a legendary brand. They do. And in 1999, Michael Dell was on the cover of every business magazine. And what did the company do? They sold laptops, servers, and desktops. That's what they did. Fast forward to today. They had to do this bizarre reverse merger with EMC and get all these dumb LBO guys involved and all this crazy shit to try to put together a bunch of anchors because they thought that might work, right? So the company's in massive distress and having to do all this crazy financial engineering and mergers and acquisitions, and now they're going to get rid of Perot Systems, and they bought Perot Systems, and they're just all over the place, right? And at the core, the company sells laptops, desktops, and servers. So what changed in 16 years? What changed was those categories went away. Their brand is great. The categories went away. That is to say, the market went there. The cloud and all these mobile devices and a whole bunch of other shit, there's the growth. So the brand is still great, but the categories are gone. And so what people have to understand is that as a company, as a product, and even as individuals, we live in a box called a category. People put a label on us. And those labels come in 3 forms. I have to have that. Oh, that's interesting, I'm not sure, and I don't need that. Human beings put everything into those 3 buckets. Legendary, doesn't suck, sucks. And when your category goes from legendary to I don't need it anymore because I get it in the cloud, you can get KKR and DOG and IUD and all these guys to do all this financial engineering, and it doesn't matter because your categories are gone. And until they fix the category problem, their brand doesn't matter, and all these crazy financial things they're going to do don't matter. And so we all have to find our place in the world, and the world has to identify with us the way that we think it matters.
Okay, I'm gonna read something from your book. Bear with me for a second while I find it.
Maybe I'll remember it.
No, well, I'm gonna read it to you, so definitely. I ruined this video thing because I can't see anything. Okay, so talking about category design and category kings. It's getting back to it a little bit, and let's say you're lucky enough to still be a category king, where people are still invested in the category and the universe has not moved on. You say, once a king emerges, customers believe it's the best, regardless of any evidence to the contrary. And as I read that, I thought, does this explain Donald Trump?
Yes. It absolutely explains Donald Trump. So we got into a lot of brain research. We said, well, what the fuck? Why does... So let me take a step back. We talk a lot about category kings, and if you think about the world that we live in, there's been a lot of discussion over the last 10 years in particular about how we're living in a winner-take-all world and the top 1% and all this stuff. Well, obviously that's true. we did a set of research in the technology business where we took every venture-backed company funded in the United States from 2000 up till, at the time, 2015. And we wanted to know the answer to the following question. What percentage of the market cap goes to the category king, the leader? So most, I'm a quote-unquote marketing guy, as are my partners. Marketing guys historically study market share. Market share is interesting and important, of course. We want to understand market cap because we think that market cap is the number one thing in business. That is to say, the value of the company. Every executive is paid to increase the value of their company. And if you're in the tech business, you want to have a disproportionate amount of the market cap. And we knew intuitively that one company was dominating in space after space after space. So we did the work. It turns out that the leader in the space gets 76% of the market cap of the space. So if you're not the leader, you're fighting for a quarter of what's left over. That's if you're lucky. Facebook has no competitor. VMware has no competitor. Palo Alto Networks has absolutely crushed everybody in the security space. And so in space after space after space, this happens. And as we were doing the research for the book, we talked to a lot of people outside of tech. So for example, we talked to this guy named Eddie Yoon. Eddie runs this consulting organization called the Cambridge Group that is owned by Thomson Reuters, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know, it'll come to me. But the company's called the Cambridge Group, and he runs their, what we would call category design practice for consumer companies, large Fortune 500 consumer companies. And he says this happens in space after space after space in the consumer business. And I can tell you the story if you care. It's actually a very cool story. But the category designer of frozen foods is a guy named Clarence Birdseye. And Clarence, in the 1920s, had this aha. You want me to tell the story?
Go ahead.
Okay. So, Clarence as a boy was into taxidermy, which, a very popular thing around here these days. And so he ends up going to work for a government, I forget which government agency now, and he ends up in northern Canada, up in Nuck. And he notices something, which is when the Inuit catch the fish and they throw it on the ice, the fish freezes. It immediately freezes. And what he notices is there's no difference between the taste of that fish that's frozen if you eat it a few days later than if you eat it right when you catch it. And that's the insight. And he says, what if you could flash freeze things at scale? What would be possible? Well, you could have fresh fish if you lived in the middle of the country. And then he thought, could this apply to other things? Corn and vegetables and blah, blah, blah. And so that's the insight. It's a problem that if you lived in the 1920s, you didn't have. And if you go and you look at the Birdseye ads, they talk about having fresh vegetables in February. He's evangelizing the problem. Now, in order to make frozen foods go as a category, what does Birdseye have to do? Well, he has to go to DuPont and convince them to commercialize cellophane because you got to wrap this shit in something. Then he's got to go to the railways and convince them to build refrigeration cars to get them to the grocery stores. Then he's got to convince the trucking companies to do the same. Then he's got to go to the grocery stores and say, hey, you need to set up an entire aisle with purpose-built fucking freezers for this thing called frozen food that is, at the time, a $0 billion opportunity. There's nobody asking for this. Right? And then you got to go to the world and you have to, what we call, condition the market to see things the way you do, which is, wouldn't it be awesome to have fresh vegetables in February when it's fucking snowing? And that's why you and I have frozen foods today. And that's why we have everything today. Somebody did that. Did I answer your question?
No, I
Okay, well, I told the bird's eye
good story, Chris.
Well, you talked about competing with them. So here's the interesting thing. Guess who's the #1 provider of frozen foods today in the United States?
Hungry Man
It's Bird's Eye. Pepsi's been trying to get Coke for over 100 years. Now listen, here's the most interesting thing, at least to us. In the tech business, the most legendary category kings in technology don't know why they're category kings. And here's the proof. Anybody know how much money Microsoft has spent on Bing?
A lot. Too much. Way too much.
I believe it was 3, it might be 2. Years ago, Henry Blodgett wrote on Business Insider an article about the fact that they had spent $10 billion between the product and the sales and marketing of Bing. And they have the fucking proof. Bing does better search, and if you use it, it does. And they have a mountain of evidence that tells advertisers that it is a much more effective advertising platform than Google. And anybody know what percentage Google has today of paid search advertising? It's in the 80s. And so, and there's a bunch of reasons why we could talk about them, but once a category king gets established, there are really only 2 ways to unseat them. They have to massively fuck up, and even when they do, it's often not enough. When Netflix fucked up, we didn't stop Netflixing. Or somebody has to redesign the category. So we're talking about enterprise software. Tom Siebel was the category king. He beat the shit out of, I was at Vantive at the time, beat the shit out of us and everybody else. And he was king shit at Turd Island until...
Benioff. Yeah.
But what
Software
did,
is bad.
what did Benioff do?
No software. It was a PC with a red circle around it.
Get a point of view.
No software.
One of the greatest category designers of modern time. And what did he do? He made the market go away. It used to be here, and now it's here. Did he do it with better features? Not a chance. Siebel had, God only knows how many more features than Salesforce had. But he taught the world, and think about how insane that was in 1998, 1999. You're going to put your customer and sales forecast data in a thing called the cloud. We don't know where it is, man. Our forecast is, we don't know. We don't have the data. That's what we're going to do. And that's what we did. Because he taught the world to think about a problem in a very different way. And to your point, he did it with one icon, which was the word software, and a red circle with a line through it. Software companies saying no software. And to this day, Benioff still pounds the table. Cloud, 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 no software. The E in CEO stands for evangelist, and evangelists, who are category designers, evangelize the problem. He made on-premise software a scandal. He made up the term on-premise software. SAP wasn't running around going, hey, want to buy some on-premise? No. And he made on-premise terrible. Like, oh, you want on-premise? Like, oh, you want dick cancer? 20 years later, he bought an island in Hawaii. Tom Siebel got run over by an elephant.
That's not funny. All right, so that was his point of view, right? Which you talk about, and I know that that's been a thing of yours even before you came. You wrote a book about category design. You talked about point of view marketing. So do you want to tell everybody a little bit about that?
Sure. So And it turns out the brain's research is amazing. What's your friend's name that we quoted in the book?
Oh, Paul Zak, who
Yeah.
you must know, right? Do you remember him from Tech Global in Rio?
Oh, yes, yes.
Dr. Oxytocin, he
Yes,
always gives
yes.
you a big long hug, and
Yes.
he's like, the 5-second hug, you have to do it, and you're like, I gotta get out of this hug.
Maybe he's just creepy.
No, he's a lovely person.
I never met him. Do you want to tell people about his research?
No, you go ahead, Christopher.
The net of it is, people remember stories. The reason Walt Disney is because people remember stories. And the fundamental mistake people make in marketing is they scream product names and they scream features. They don't tell us stories. What legendary category designers do is they tell us stories, and they tell us a very particular kind of story. First, they frame a problem, and they spend 80% of their time there. The more urgent, the more strategic, the more horrifying, the more terrifying the problem, the more time, energy, money, thinking, and attention you and I will spend on solving that problem. So they educate the world about a problem in a very particular way, and that's what they evangelize. And then they speak a little bit about the solution. And the reason they don't have to speak very much about the solution is there's an interesting thing in the human brain, which is if somebody articulates your problem in the most powerful way, you and I assume they have the solution. I'll never forget in the old days at Mercury Interactive when we were doing exactly this at Mercury, and we were about 9 months or so into repositioning the company around a whole new category. I remember walking into the CEO's office. I was the head of marketing, and the company was run by mostly Israelis. We had about 3,000, maybe 3,200 people in the company, and roughly half of them were Israeli. And so the CEO was an Israeli guy, Amnon Landon, and he's sitting there, and he had former commando, I walk into his office, and he goes, Chris, all we ever do is talk about the fucking problem. When do we get to talk about our solutions? And I said, Amnon, maybe never. Right? Benioff, no software. And so that's really what legendary category designers do. They tell a very provocative and engaging story, and they center it around a problem. And, not to get political, but Trump is Trump because he's been framing problems. And every, in some cases, day, he frames a new problem. And as he has done that it's only been a year. He launched his campaign in June, so it's slightly more than a year. Every time he launches a new problem, notice that they're all in the same vein. There's a common thread to them. And if you identify with the way he is, and I'm going to use these words on purpose, framing these problems, it doesn't matter that he doesn't have a 4,332 page position paper on his fuck website. Because people just assume, oh, yes, immigrants, bad. He has the plan. Excellent. Right? He must have the solution. Because he put his finger right on the problem.
So do you want to talk about other points of view that you think are particularly germane or revelatory or maybe people haven't heard of before, points of view marketing?
So no matter how complex the solution, the POV needs to be simple. And this is one particularly those of us in the technology industry get all screwed up about. There's one that I love. This may sound funny coming from me. How many people here know what Spanx are?
Yeah.
So there's this gal, I think her name is Sarah Blakely, if I'm remembering right. No. And if I'm not mistaken, she's from Atlanta. And she's a younger woman. Anyway, she was getting ready for a party and she was putting on whatever she was putting on, and she didn't like the way this, whatever it was, I can't remember what it was, but whatever dress or whatever it was, looked on her, and she bought, this outfit that she thought was going to look good on her, and it didn't. And she thought, well, I need something that smoothes some shit out here. And so she went to work. But the most fascinating thing to me that she did was, I've never worn the bra. Do they have Spanx for men? They probably should, but